Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Dombrowski, and I'm one of your town councilors. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce some of my colleagues that are here tonight. Peter May, Tony Longo, Ann Santos, Paul Donaco, and Julie Smith-Galvin. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it, especially on this cold evening. Tonight is the first in a series of conversations we're looking to have with the community relative to a really exciting initiative that we're looking at for our downtown. And this is the result of many years of thought and hope and expectation, and we're hopeful that its time has come. Back at Fall Town Meeting, the community approved the first funding aspect of this, the up 25% design phase of what will be a project that we're looking at that will span from the lake all the way to the junction and down Water Street as well. And so we've partnered with VHB. The VHB has been a solid partner of our community now for about 2 decades to begin the initial stages of talking through and discussing what it is we're looking to have our downtown look like. And specifically, we want to be sure that we address some of the needs that do exist and also identify the opportunities that present themselves with this kind of a project. I should point out so everyone's aware that from an infrastructure standpoint, we're already past the life cycle of certain things. There's water main on Main Street that needs to be replaced. There's a sewer main as well that has to be addressed at that time. That will require paving. That will require a number of handicap cutouts in the sidewalk that are from the 80s that need to be now ADA compliant. So with all of that comes considerable cost, it comes repaving, and those are things that we know need to be done. And so this is a unique opportunity for us as a community to be able to leverage those projects with state funding. And so ultimately, the investment of this community would be approximately $1 million. The expected anticipated return from the state would be an additional $10 million. So we're looking at in total about an $11 million project for an approximate cost to the taxpayers of about $1 million. And that's a significant and impressive situation we could find ourselves in. But most importantly, this is about community conversations. The downtown has tremendous charm that we want to restore. This is not an opportunity for us to just do anew. It's to build on what we already have. So if you like the downtown as it is, we want to enhance it. We want to try to restore it back to what it used to be like. But we also want to make sure that it's 21st century compatible. Multimodal transportation is one of the focuses. Being able to make sure that we have a downtown that better addresses the needs that we have as a community. So this is about opportunities, and tonight is about conversation. So about 90% of this evening is structured around just that, conversation. There are no preconceived notions about what this project will look like. There are no preconceived notions about what the end result will be. Tonight is about listening to all of you, and this is the first in a series of opportunities to do that, to listen to all of you, understand where you see the opportunities for the downtown, understand how you use that space and what you'd like to be able to use it for going forward. And then taking that information, working with the VHB, the professionals here, to ensure that we have the best outcome that we can. And it truly is an improvement. It truly is a revitalization in a way that we've not seen. We've talked about it for a long time, but now it's time to put your thoughts into action. And so thank you all for coming tonight. I next wanted to introduce Jeffrey Morrison Logan. He's from VHB. He's one of the engineers that's been working on this project with us and will continue to do so. He's going to give you just some updates in terms of where things stand now, where we're headed, and where the community engagement will be. And for those of you that will be watching this starting tomorrow through WCAT, if you couldn't make it this evening, rest assured we'll have other opportunities. There'll be a series of community engagements where you'll be able to participate, take part, and this is an open dialogue. So this is the start of a conversation this evening, but that conversation will be going on for many months to come. So again, thank you for coming. And here's Jeffrey.
Well, good evening, everyone. How's everyone tonight? Everyone doing well? Excellent. Well, it's always great to see so many people turn out for a meeting like this tonight. So thank you for spending your time with us this evening. We have a lot on the agenda for everyone tonight, and hopefully everyone had a chance to get the agenda on the way in. Sign in, because we're going to try to reach out to folks as we go through this process. So if you don't have an agenda, you can go back up to the sign-in table before you go to your tables tonight and make sure you get caught up on what we're going to do. So for me, as a planner, I love working with communities to figure out what to do with the heart of their communities. And what's really exciting about Wakefield is just how many great things are already happening in the heart of your downtown. As a consultant team has spent many a day here thinking about your downtown, thinking about tonight, there's so many wonderful things that I'm expecting that we're going to be talking about tonight, from the common to the heart of the retail activities, to some of the users that have been there, some of the historic aspects of the downtown, the architecture, the character, but also, as we talked about before, a little bit about the mobility, thinking about how people move and circulate throughout the downtown, thinking about cars, thinking about bicycles, thinking about pedestrians, and thinking about transit, and how all of those systems come together really in the 21st century and what you want to do with the heart of your downtown. Not unlike many other communities throughout Massachusetts, they go through the similar process when you've reached that kind of life cycle of what the heart of your downtown is doing in terms of its streetscape, its safety, its accessibility. So it's a pretty exciting time, I think, for you to be thinking about that next chapter in the heart of your downtown as well. So what do we do to get ready for this type of a process? As was mentioned, we have engineers, scientists, we have planners, we have designers that really spend quality time in the first part of this process doing things like surveys. So you might have seen some crews out in the field doing some surveys of the entire downtown. We do traffic counts to understand where people are moving through the heart of downtown and where there might be pinch points and where we need to kind of figure out some of those issues as we move forward. So we've been doing a lot of homework over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks in particular, getting ready for the conversation tonight. So if we go back to the agenda for a second, so just in terms of logistics for tonight, what we're going to be doing is spending most of the evening at the tables behind you. We have the entire downtown set up into 5 different areas. From the north, middle, and south on Main Streets, we're going to have conversations recognizing that those segments of Main Street probably have some differences that we need to hear about from you. We're going to kind of head east and west and talk about Albion Street and Water Street, recognizing those critical east-west connections probably have some differences that we need to hear from you tonight as well. And then what we'll do after about an hour and a half worth of conversation, we'll regroup for maybe 10 or 15 minutes to talk about some of the major takeaways. So when we're having this conversation, as the consultant team, we're just listening for the majority of the night to understand where your preferences are, where the concerns are as well. So just go to the next slide real quick. So what we've been doing so far is really recognizing that you want to achieve a lot of these different goals. We've been hearing this through all the conversations we've had to date. We've had some really good conversations with some local stakeholders that represent the business community and commerce and so forth, just to understand what we're trying to achieve here in terms of the downtown streetscape, safety, activating the downtown, building upon all these great things that you have here as well ready today. And in terms of where we are, next slide, please. We've already done a lot of work, as I mentioned, road safety audits to understand the operations and the critical safety of the movements. We've had several team work sessions so far, meeting with the stakeholders. And the things that we've heard so far is really just about understanding how we can pivot from this moment in time to build upon these things, from things like your great history, opportunities to further connect your downtown, maybe to your different neighborhoods, for example. This idea to address bicyclists, because maybe that wasn't part of the equation 50, 60 years ago. Maybe bikes need to be part of the downtown equation. Understanding parking, the way that it operates, and making sure that works in a very important way. This idea that we've all noticed that from the Common down towards Water Street, how your downtown tapers and the width of the road really changes. So that actually creates some design challenges when you think about the cross section and the width of the road as you go from the north to south. And it quickly became important, obvious to us, the importance of some of these side streets, how they filter into downtown as well. So next slide as well. So how we're going to organize tonight when we get to the breakout sessions is we're really going to spend time talking about these different sections. We'll spend about an hour and a half together. We'll spend about 15 minutes reporting on each of these areas. If the folks from VHB could raise their hand throughout the room. So we have many of us here from VHB to listen for the evening. We're going to be stationed at the back. And what we're going to do is spend 15 minutes on large maps talking about issues and opportunities. And what we're going to ask you to do at the sessions is use a lot of these Postit notes that we have, a lot of pens that we have out there, and we're going to take as many notes as we possibly can, fill up the drawings and the sheets that we have out there to talk about issues and opportunities so that we can do more homework when we come back for the next public meeting a few weeks out from right now. And remember, as many of these as we can fill up, the more voices that we hear tonight as well. So that's a very important part of the process as well. So let's go through some of the highlights from where we are today. And Elsa, you're going to join us in talking about some of our initial observations. So we want to hear if we're on the right track or not from you tonight. Elsa?
Hi, everyone. We're going to start on the North Main Street section of the study area. So looking at the first location up on the top, the Salem Street at Main Street, traffic-related issues is that when we look at the Salem Street, there's some queuing coming from Salem Street southbound into the intersection. Particularly in the morning, there's a relatively long queue and delays that drivers would experience at that location. And we also, based on the count data that we have collected, we also could see that there were some cut through on the other streets, trying to avoid the intersection itself. So operations at the location needs to probably be improved. Second location is where Lake Avenue at Spalding Street. The parking at Lake Avenue is angled when you're coming in. So when you're backing out of the parking spot, you kind of have to go all the way down, take a left onto Spalding before you can come back out. This kind of creates an issue, particularly for the residents that's at the end of Spalding Street, because you're using their area to kind of turn around and come back out. On Spalding Street itself, there's also a lack of sidewalk on the playground side. So once you park, you get out of the car, there's really no area for you to stand and then walk through to go to the park itself. And with children, we kind of want to be having a safer environment for them. There's also a wide pavement area on Spalding Street itself. There's no defined parking kind of across the street from the playground. There are people who are parked around there, which, once again, if you let your kids out, they're running across the street, that kind of poses a safety concern for children. The third location that we're focusing on the North Main Street here is the Y, where Common Street and Main Street kind of come together. The town has put this stop sign on Common Street trying to help out with the operations at that location. But since there's a pretty wide pavement area at that Y location, for people, particularly people who are not familiar with the location, it kind of is hard to know where you're actually allowed to turn. So that's kind of a focus area at that location. In addition to that little cut through where Crescent Street kind of comes out, the rockery itself, just between that area, it's kind of having a sightline issue. So when you're kind of coming out, either taking a left or a right, it's hard to see people that are coming down Main Street or Common Street for that matter.
Hi. I'm Kathy Lynch. I'm a landscape architect with VHB. So we've all been looking at the engineering group and the planning group and the landscape architects really together, and it's pretty hard to separate out what's a circulation issue from what's a pedestrian and urban design issue. So similar to what Elsa had been describing, this is a section taken just south of the lake, looking south up Lake Street. So some of the issues that we see there, as Elsa described, the angle parking, that means it's pretty difficult for pedestrians to move around that area safely just because of backing up vehicles. Pedestrian walkways that are existing on either side of Lake Street are fairly constrained and up against utility poles and trash barrels, and it's definitely an area that could be looked into. Just how can we make this feel more pedestrian friendly, whether it's somehow a wider walkway, creating more of a separation from the church parking lot. Then as we further, as Elsa described, move down into Spalding Street, again, the wide open areas that if we can define the wide pavement to be more of a pedestrian area. I know in the summer for a lot of events, there are the porta potties or the ice cream truck. Right now it's just wide open pavement, so it's kids running across from the playgrounds. So it's really those type of pedestrian scale enhancements that we want to look at in this area. Then as we move down Common Street, here the challenge is a little bit different. In a way, it feels like a no man's land in terms of it's not a main street, but it's two-way traffic. You can park going southbound. Northbound, it's allowed to park, but it's pretty difficult because there's no curb line. There's no actual sidewalk there. So if you park where that white vehicle is, you can't open the passenger side door and get out. So we know it's a challenge in that area. And again, in a lot of this obviously is greener than a lot of the spaces, but most of the lighting in the area isn't really pedestrian scale and friendly for nighttime use. And there's really, other than crossings down at the Rockery and up at Church Street, there's no formal pedestrian crossings to sort of encourage activity between the Upper Common and the Town Hall and the other activities on the west side of the street. And then we have the Rockery. If we can. As Elsa described, what's tough here is you have this historic series of historic monuments in the middle of the highway. There's no crosswalks that get to it. There's no ADA access to it. When you're coming southbound, you can't even see it because of the Rockery. So that combined with, again, it's more of the utilitarian light poles and just for enhancements for pedestrian scale in the area. You know, what we want to consider could be some more pedestrian scale lighting and, again, improving access to the Rockery.
Okay, so let's go on to our next area. So we're going to keep on shifting as we go south. So down to Middle Main. Let's talk a couple issues there as well.
Yeah, so for this section of Middle Main, so a bit based on observations and also stakeholder meetings and also the roadway safety audit that identifies some of the safety issues that's along this area. One major thing that we have is that the crossings along Main Street are very wide, especially towards where the split where the Common Street and Main Street is. So that poses a concern for pedestrians when they're trying to cross. Either you have to dart out through the median, you know, kind of wait a little bit and then dart again to the other side of the road. In addition to that, the angle parking is also not really helping with the sight line of the pedestrians. So pedestrians emerge behind the car, and then some, you know, when you're coming down, that's when you see them. So the angle parking is kind of blocking the sight line of pedestrian activities here. The angle parking is also poses a concern for bicyclists, especially when they're, you know, when they're riding down the road. You know, you can't really see them as well when you're kind of backing out of the parking spot. And then at Water Street, so number 4, at Water Street at Main Street, the operation there, the concern here is that when you're coming from the right side of the screen, going northbound on Main Street, there are vehicles that are, you know, sometimes going over the angle parking that's along the right side of the road to come and take a right turn. But then when that happens, there's also angle parking along Water Street. So that kind of also poses a safety concern if you're taking the turn there. The roadway alignment itself for Water Street and West Water Street is slightly offset, which can make, you know, maneuvering through the intersection kind of challenging here. And then for bicycles, like I said earlier, you know, it's kind of challenging for bicycles to go through this area itself.
And again, there's a lot of overlap between the transportation issues and the urban design issues. Right here at the northern end of sort of what we call the middle Main Street block, there is enough space to have a median, which does contribute a much greener and more pedestrian feel to the road. I think what's important here is if you were walking down Main Street and wanted to cross, would you rather cross here or another couple blocks down where there's no protected area? But in general, walking all the way down Main Street, I think right now there's a lot of areas where there are some benches, some trash receptacles. There's really no consistency to really give a unified sense of the downtown. There are some more ornamental light fixtures. They're so tall, again, they don't really contribute to the pedestrian experience of the space. So as we're going through these exercises, what can we do to help create a real sense of downtown and contribute to the space? And then here at Middle Main Street, once we get further down past south of Albion Street, there are challenges. We still do at least start out with a wide roadway, but there's no protected median. So it really is a challenge to get across the street. But on the plus side, you have these great wide sidewalks. And I think when we were doing our site walk, that's really what jumped out is you just have a real amenity there on both sides of the street. You have 16-foot wide sidewalks. So what can we do to help improve that? Help improve, the storefronts in terms of fronting onto the space to increase pedestrian traffic. And then down at Water Street, at the square, again, combined with all the transportation issues, there's a lot going on there. I live over in Woburn, and when I come over here on a Saturday about noontime, it's like, yeah, there's a lot. So between the buses, bus stops, you've got traffic lights, pedestrian crossings in some locations, but not in other locations. But then you do have a really nice wide buffer at the park that's there. And so what are the steps, that you could all really see us taking to improve the pedestrian experience in this area and to make it more welcoming for people who are waiting for the buses, or just to increase traffic in that area?
Okay, so let's keep on going across to Water Street right now. We'll do a little diversion as we head out towards where the supermarket is. What are some of the issues there, Elsa?
So the transportation traffic-related issues along the Water Street corridor. So the first spot is the Shaw's parking lot up on the top of the map. The driveway that's coming out of Shaw's is very narrow, so it's kind of hard for you guys are all laughing. It's kind of hard to take a turn out of there, so we're going to take a look at that. This is one of the issues that we saw based on observations, also through stakeholder meeting. Second is the intersection at Vernon Street, Crescent Street, and the Main Street itself. So the signals are not too coordinated here, so it creates kind of vehicle queuing, along that stretch of the three intersections. So that's part of the traffic-related issues here. Third is parking. So particularly outside Sunny Nodos, or just adjacent to that, the parking itself, when they're backing up, is actually, there's a lack of definition between where the sidewalk is and where the parking area is. So when they're when they're backing out, they're pretty much backing into the sidewalk, I guess. So that's an issue as well. And earlier I talked about the angle parking, along kind of closer to the intersection, the angle parking along Water Street there. The roadway alignment, I've already talked about that earlier, where it's offset. So it kind of may be a little challenging to maneuver through the intersection. And there's also observed cut-through traffic using Lincoln Street, coming Water Street, taking a right onto Smith Street, and then kind of come back out onto Main Street. So there are some cut-through traffic concerns along this area itself.
And I'll just quickly say, because again, a lot of the urban design issues are pretty much the same through the corridor. This one particular section and photograph here is in front of the restaurant, or where their parking is behind it. And it's a challenging area. How do we better define the sidewalk in that area and make it more pedestrian friendly? And really the materials all along Water Street up until Shaw's, just some general pedestrian improvements, and what can we think about doing there?
So for South Main Street, the portion right out here outside Galvin Middle School here, there are concerns about children crossing across to McDonald's. So the pedestrian crossing is a concern based on the feedback from the stakeholder meeting. Galvin driveway operations. So when school is kind of at a pickup and drop off, there is a crossing guard, but it's kind of creating backup along Main Street. Parent drop-off pickup activity on Main Street are also observed. So it probably poses some safety concerns if the children are kind of just darting out into the roadway and not really using the crosswalk that's provided. varying roadway width and lack of lane definition. This portion of Main Street, the South Main Street, is very wide, so there's not really too much pavement markings per se along this area. So it's kind of, for people who are not really familiar, is it a 1 lane, is it 2 lane, kind of cross? And then the connectivity to future rail trail. So there's a rail trail coming in where Vernon Street kind of come back out, and the trailhead is just where the around number 5. So, just to think about how to connect, if the kids are going to use the rail trail to kind of come down and bike to school, how do you connect them to the rail trail from this side of the road to the other side of the road? And then lastly, at Nahant Street, there is a signal operation and queues. There's a kind of a queuing that's kind of backing up into where the Broadway intersection is based on some feedback. So that's kind of a focus area for us as well.
And I'll say just try to be brief so we can all get to the tables and you can provide your feedback here. Really, again, as what Elsa had said, there's a number of opportunities here. You have prime priorities, which is the crossing here at the middle school. There is this triangular park across the street that what we're calling, in effect, is Trailhead Park. We have an opportunity there as the start of the rail trail. And then moving south, where it is so wide, what are the opportunities that we can take advantage of to make it much more pedestrian friendly, traffic calming, to make it more of a gateway up to downtown from the area, from Nahant Street south as they approach.
So I think this might be the last one, but Albion Street. So along Albion Street, it's a pretty long corridor, but there's actually not any pedestrian crossings along Albion Street. So when you cross, you're really just darting across the street from one side to another. At North Ave at Albion Street, we also observe some accessibility concerns there. So, this is a pretty heavily traveled intersection, for pedestrians and for vehicles. But there are some pedestrian push buttons or, curb ramps that are kind of missing some warning panels, so it's not up to ADA compliance. Lastly, on the bottom of the page there, that's where the Gould Street intersection is. At that location, the crossing distance is extremely long. There's also a lack of stop sign that's coming out from Gould Street, so that's also a focus area for us at that location.
And just briefly on Albion Street, because I'm assuming that many of you have also probably been involved over the past couple of years where we did do a really quick study on maybe some improvements that could be considered for Albion Street. The one advantage there is it is a one-way street, so you don't have as many pedestrian vehicle conflicts, but there's no crossings. There's really no pedestrian amenities to make you want to walk down the street. There's not room for trees. It's some pretty out-of-scale light fixtures. So really, what can we do there to help increase it and really want to draw people in either direction, actually? Once the Foundry, if that area we've heard is being redeveloped, you want to be drawing those pedestrians up to downtown and creating stops along the way. So these are the sort of things that we'll talk about once we get into our breakout sessions.
Excellent. So back to where we are on the agenda. So really the rest of the evening is about having these conversations with you. We just want to give you a little bit of a flavor for the 5 different areas, some things that jumped out to us as we've had our conversations with some stakeholders and as we walk through the entire corridor together as a team. And tell us if you agree or if you think that we're missing some parts of it, and really have that conversation about what do you think of the issues and the opportunities. This is, again, like once in a lifetime opportunity to think about what the change is for this area. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time at the breakout tables. I think if folks want to move in a few seconds to the tables, we're going to have about 10 to 12 people at each of these stations. And I think you can self-select where you want to go, but try to balance out if a table gets filled up. And what we're going to do is spend about 15 minutes on each of these 5 areas, okay? We'll spend about the next hour and 15 minutes going through each of these areas. When we're done with that, we're going to actually spend a little bit of time going through each of the facilitators, talking about one major thing that we've heard at the tables. What we're going to do is we're going to scan all of these images, scan all of the Post-it notes, go back and really collect everything that we've heard tonight. But we thought it'd be interesting to hear what the table maybe talked about the thing that came up at that breakout session for everyone. So if we want to move to the back of the tables, you'll see there's some maps on the tables. The facilitators will start getting into the conversations. Have a lot of fun tonight. We really appreciate your time. Okay, so folks want to feel free to stay where you are in the back of the room, have a seat and so forth. So that went by, I think, really fast as we went through each of those 5 different areas. And I think you should give all of yourselves a round of applause for all the hard work that you just did. That was fantastic to see. So round of applause for everyone in the group tonight. So you can imagine from our perspective, we really wanted to structure all of this evening about listening and learning. So as I was going around from table to table, I actually heard a lot of commonality between the different themes that were coming up and actually some differences in some of the areas. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned earlier, scan all of these. Thank you all for all these wonderful comments. We have hundreds and hundreds of comments if you think about all those Post-it notes tonight. We're going to try to find the commonalities between these, also look for the differences. And what's exciting is a few weeks from right now, we're going to come back with a series of alternatives for you to react to again. So we're kind of excited about that next step. So what we thought we'd do before we close out the night is just hear from the facilitators, each of these tables, maybe just talk about one major thing that your group talked about the most that might have been either an interesting idea or something you spent most of your time talking about, and it could be anything. So Adam, you want to go first?
Thank you, everybody. So my group had a few themes going on. The one I'd like to point out is the concerns around the rockery, traffic circulation.
Was that a common theme tonight, probably? Yes.
But yeah, just the access to the rockery, pedestrian access, getting around the rockery, coming into Wakefield, it blocks your vision. Yeah, that's pretty much perfect.
Excellent. So yeah, so we have a lot of homework to do around the rockery, from understanding the historic aspects. I heard a lot of people talking about how we even get to the rockery from the outside edges, and kind of cleaning up that space and celebrating at the same time. So a lot of things that we need to reflect upon. Elsa, what did your group talk about?
So just like Adam, we have some traffic concerns, but we also kind of come up with some opportunities that could happen. So some of them were, some of the suggestions was making, some of the streets one way, kind of closing off Common Street to a one-way instead. Aside from traffic, our group also talked about, Albion Street and other streets along the area to make it more inviting, to beautify it, to put streetscape, kind of bringing pedestrian in, providing parking for bicycles, just alternative modes of transportation, just trying to, get them out of their cars and bring them into downtown.
Excellent. Yes. So it's often when you do these types of exercise, you realize maybe the things that are missing in the downtown. So maybe there's things that if you can use this process to put a few more things in, you might be able to use the downtown different than what you're doing right now as well. Right? Kathy, how about you?
I think there's a lot of commonalities in everything. The rockery was a big point of discussion. I would say probably two of the things. Yes, make it a more beautiful downtown to come into. Make Albion Street a gateway, because especially now with the Foundry area being redeveloped, draw those pedestrians down. Make it inviting for people to walk, so not as much parking is needed. Consider, again, parking on other streets and one-way streets. In general, beautify the area around Water Street. I think a lot of commonalities with what we had before in terms of the school. One thing is a huge concern about parking. Yeah. So we want all this, but also how can we achieve a more beautiful downtown, better pedestrian accommodation, but not lose parking and improve parking just so people can get to the storefronts.
Excellent. Excellent. Amy, how about you?
I think everybody pretty much covered what we had talked about, but beautifying the area and creating more parking, finding opportunities for more parking lots, see what the town can create from what we have now. Beautifying the area, making a gateway. The rockery was also an issue. Great. I think we pretty much covered
Excellent.
everybody's points.
So Lori's group, I love when I went by the group in the back corner to my left, is as soon as that paper rolled over, the Post-it notes started flying on the sheet, one after the other. So I think they get like the Post-it note award of the evening. So Lori, how about your group?
Yeah, again, it's great to go last because everybody picked what I said. But yeah, a lot of street trees, Kathy, you'd be happy. Everybody wants street trees. Spent a lot of time actually on Water Street and how much that needs some attention. Especially people coming in, they feel that Water Street, my group felt Water Street is also a gateway to the town, and there's a lot of traffic that comes down there, and it's just not very pretty. It's not easy to walk around. Shaw's driveway, we got to do something about that and try to make that work. So yeah, and again, parking, maybe a municipal lot somewhere, some municipal parking.
Great. Well, thank you. So, and the last thing I'll say for the evening was a big thank you to all of us. We spent a lot of time listening. It was really helpful for us to get to know your community. We're excited about taking that next step and thinking about how we can help solve some of these problems and not lose some of the great things that are already happening here, because it is a wonderful downtown that you have. I can't stress that enough as well. But I think there's some things that we can do to modernize a couple things and really kind of bring in the pieces that might be missing as well. So we're looking forward to taking those next couple of steps with you as well. So in terms of closing out for the night, so big thank you from us as well. Help us close us out.
First, thank you to VHB. We have a great team that the town is working with. So thank you for your continued hard work. I know in the weeks and months to come, we have a lot more work to do. Thank you everyone for turning out. You are all making an impact on this project. And there are some really great ideas and walking around to the table. So thank you, each and every one of you, for coming out. As far as our next steps in this process, the community conversation is just beginning tonight. It's ongoing in the weeks and months to come. So we have a couple dates ahead of us here. We have March 21st is our public meeting talking about alternatives. We have so many different thoughts now and ideas that the team will now take back and distill down and then come back with some alternatives for us all to consider. And then on April 9th, we have a preferred concept plan meeting. That's just going to present some concepts and some other alternatives as well. So a lot of opportunity for continued community input, community conversation. So thank you everyone for coming out, and have a good evening.